Now in this workshop I'm going to paint a different scene from the more familiar marina landscapes. It's some ruins near where I live, at Leiston Abbey. However, I think it's wrong to think that you need a different technique simply because it happens to be an unfamiliar subject. The important thing is to see the subject clearly in terms of the drawing, the tone and the edges, and concentrate on getting good colour, credible and realistic and attractive colour and texture. Now when it comes to texture in watercolour, there are essentially three ways that you can indicate texture. And remember, the purpose of indicating the texture in your painting is to give some additional information about the surface of the form that you're painting. Basically, you can get texture from the thick or thinness of the paint, whether it's a consistency of almost toothpaste straight out of the tube, or whether it's a really dilute wash. A lot of the texture, secondly, can come from the surface of the paper. Sometimes you'll be painting on very rough paper, could be not, which is neither smooth nor rough, halfway in between both, or very smooth paper. The third method of indicating or capturing texture is the way that you apply the paint to the brush to the paper, and that will vary from each person. We all have a different natural pressure and method of delivering the paint to the paper. The other methods of indicating texture will be according to the edge. Obviously in a ruin there's a lot of rough stone edges, whereas perhaps in another softer form, drapery, the edges will be very soft, diffuse. So let's get started with the painting. I've already drawn it out so that we can immediately start. I'll just mention that this is a subject I painted about 3 or 4 weeks ago on site. The weather was very variable. We had some showers and some sun and some wind, and the little video clips will be ones that I took when I was there. Now this is a drawing of Leiston Abbey in bright sunlight on quite a mixed weathered day. I painted this a few weeks ago when there were showers and wind and blue sky and clouds all in the space of a few hours. Now I've drawn it out, but I only put enough pencil work on it just to guide the brush. I think it's a mistake to divide the painting into sections like, here's the drawing, I've done the drawing, now I'm going to sort of colour it in. Colouring in is not painting, so don't overdo the drawing. Right, we'll start with some of the brickwork, which is very light in places. The important thing is to keep everything changing all of the time to get some sort of variety. First marks are always the most difficult because you've got to pitch them at the right tone. Now don't forget to hold the brush, and every time you go back at the end, and every time you go back to the palette, just to get a little bit of variation in colour. Don't worry about being absolutely accurate. We're producing a painting, not a photograph. Being too literal, I think, is a mistake. And you lose the sort of essence. Now keep going and keep the what. Now you notice I start at the top and work down. And my aim, as usual, is to try and get as near to the final result as I can straight away. Bit of raw umber. Very, very light here. And if you press the brush and whiz it across, you'll get a little bit of dry brush. Now I don't want to paint that shadowy area. My aim is to try and get as near to the final marks on the painting as possible straight away. Bit of aureolin and raw sienna, nice and light. A little bit of cobalt violet. And then very, very light at the bottom here and here. Bit of light red, lots of water. And this is, let's have a little bit of cadmium lemon. A bit of raw sienna into the same mixture. Bit of light red. Oh, a bit of burnt sienna. Let's go back to the light red. Just a hint of some warmth there with the bricks. Just push any little differences in the colour that you happen to note. And that'll make for a more interesting painting. Now as we come across to this section, there's more sort of red brick in it. The little flecks of white paper left will be useful for where the flint is catching the sun. A light red down there, here. And then a bit of raw umber, lots of water, so that all merges. Now it's important to connect this, well, we'll need to get it in here as well. It's important to connect the ruins to the grass area. So a little bit of Viridian and aureolin yellow and raw sienna. To give this grass a first wash of nice rich green. Again, start at the top, press the brush and go, let the paper, as the brush goes across the paper, you can feel the paper pull the paint off the brush. As long as you've loaded the whole of the brush, that's the important thing. Don't just load the tip of the brush, otherwise there's absolutely no point in pressing the belly of the brush into the paper. Any little flecks of a bit of more raw sienna, any little flecks of bit more aureolin, little flecks of white will indicate the sort of dew and rain that was on the grass when I was there. Keep going so you get a nice even wash, which we shall put some little texture on later on. We get to the bottom and then stop and just let it dry out for a few moments. Now this is all dried out now. I think I'll do the sky. Incidentally, this is just a piece of Bockingford £200 knot paper. I'm just using round brushes. This is a small sort of Chinese brush. Now the sky keeps changing on the day I was there. Sometimes there's a bit of blue sky and then there was clouds. I want the sun to shine. So instead of using, let's make a start. Now instead of using cobalt, I'll use a mixture of ultramarine and Windsor blue. You can make quite an interesting blue like that, and even you can make some cobalt. Now the important thing when you do the sky is that the sky doesn't follow the ruins. It needs to be a backdrop and reflect the light of the day, but also try and design the sky in a way which will enhance the painting. I'll take it round the ruins, but of course over the distant trees. I think it's important to realise when you're painting, and I think a lot of people misunderstand this, is that, and it's probably particularly true when you paint outside, that you're not painting a moment in time. I think that's a mistake. Mainly brought around from people painting too much from photographs, which are a moment in time. This is a little bit of light red and go right over that chimney, and light red and raw sienna. Just let that join them. Now you're not painting moments in time, you're painting the passage of time. When you're painting outside, well indeed when you're painting indoors, it's going to take hour and a half, 2 hours. But of course if you're using a photograph, the photograph doesn't change. But if you're painting outside, things do change. They change a lot. And you're more aware of that. And therefore you're perhaps more inclined, this is a bit of light red and raw sienna, you're more inclined to be conscious that you're taking shadows which are at their best at one particular time. Ultramarine and light red, bit of raw sienna. Yes. Oh, that's far too strong. Haven't mixed properly. Ultramarine, light red and raw sienna there, and then a little bit of blue. I'll just take up that excess moisture there. The blue of course will be a little paler as you come down near the horizon. And then again light raw sienna and light red. Right over all of the trees, so that when we leave any sections unpainted between the branches and leaves, there is sky rather than white bits. There is an argument for saying that the sky behind trees should be painted a little bit darker, because there's always a sort of a tracery of branches and twigs and leaves which reduce the amount of light coming through. But nevertheless, if you can think of that and you can darken it, and just take that little there. If you can think of that and darken your paint sufficiently to convey that slight, and it is very slight, reduction in the light coming through areas, then by all means do it. Frankly, when I'm getting there, I'm so pleased to have got successfully to the bottom of the picture that I nearly always forget to do that. You're busy concentrating on the painting. Just take up these excess strips and then stop. Now I think what I'll do, and I've just had a brief stop there to allow that to all dry out nicely and clean the palette. Don't worry about the water. A lot of people worry about dirty water, but in fact you see when you put it out like that, although it looks a bit mucky in there, in fact it's fine. Now just a reminder of some good housekeeping here. I think it's a good idea not to put a great puddle of water there and add paint to the water. Add water to the paint. So there's plenty of water on this brush, which is one of these Chinese sort of goat wolf hair type brushes, which wear very nicely. So let's cheer myself up and do some shadows. Now some of the shadows are shaded areas and some of them are cast shadows. And really this is a bit of raw sienna, raw umber, ultramarine and a bit of cobalt violet actually. I shall keep changing this. It's very difficult to identify whether that's the right sort of colour. So let's try it and see how it goes against this. Start at the top. Now this is a cast, this is the shaded side. I think that could be a bit darker. Because remember, add a little bit of cobalt violet. Remember, watercolour always dries lighter and less intense in colour. Put a bit of ultramarine with that now. We can get a little bit of knobbliness on the edge of it. It'll help. It's just that tiny bit of light through that window coming through. But as this is in the shade, put a bit of raw umber with that. As this is in the shade, it's important not to have any sparkle in this, which takes away the sense of the sun not reaching this area. Again, a little bit more cobalt violet. It's a little bit low. That window comes a bit lower than that. Tiny bit of work slowly down. There's no need to do it all in a hurry. And simplify the shadowed areas. As I come down, I'm going to add a little bit of Viridian green, just to sort of give a sense, probably exaggerated a little bit. Let's put a bit of raw umber with that. That there's some reflected light coming up from the grass into the shaded area. Now the remaining shadow is a different type of shadow. It's a cast shadow, and cast shadows tend to be a little bit darker. Again, as far as the texture is concerned, just indicate there's an opportunity there, just on the edge, to indicate the texture of the wall. And I'm going to push. This is an example where the shadow was a little bit better and more interesting earlier on, when the shadow was slightly more at an angle. Again, work hard to cover the paint. then that is quite light area here, a bit of cadmium red, just those bricks here. It could be a bit redder, I think. Just put a bit more light red with that. I'm going to take some of that paint off, just I want to make it a bit lighter, and just with a dry brush. Now it's really quite dark in some of this area here, so ultramarine and burnt umber in here. Let's put it almost raw ultramarine there, and Hellings. It's a bit more obvious, and then that's an opportunity to get that shadow going up there. Now remember, this is a cast shadow, and therefore it can be a little bit darker, and then we can have a bit of reflected light perhaps with a bit of green in there, because cast shadows are areas where a form, in this case the wall, has blocked the source of light. Now where the shadow meets the ground there's a slight incline and a bit of texture there. Now there's various other shadows, one here which we can put a bit of raw umber. I know many books say mix up a nice big lot of paint and make big broad statements. I think it's more interesting to keep changing the colour, frankly. It's more interesting to do, and therefore hopefully will be more interesting for the viewer to look at. And if the colours look attractive and they look believable and credible, then you'll get away with it. Now there's a sort of shadow down this side here. I mean, frankly, if the shadow is at its best there about 9:30 in the morning, but they're improved over here by 10 o'clock, then I'll take them both. That's what I mean about painting the passage of time. Let's put a bit of cerulean blue with this shadow here. And a bit of raw umber, raw sienna. Shadow here. Although some of these are quite sort of small strokes, don't get too sort of tight about it. You mustn't show that you're frightened of making the mark. What goes through the brain, as I've said before, goes down the arm and comes out through the brush. And it's important to make a good, confident stroke. I just want to do other little marks we can make. And while that's drying, we'll just put in this chimney stack here and the roof, burnt sienna. Now I've stopped painting the roof there, and I'm painting this wall. I want the texture of the wall to be indicated by obviously the edge, but also the texture of the paint, a little bit of dry brush on the ruins, the facing wall. Don't need much, just to indicate where there is some sort of texture. In fact, it's very easy to sort of overdo it, frankly. Finally, just in this section, a bit of dry brush, raw sienna, sorry, light red and burnt sienna, get it off the brush. A lot of more. To indicate these are the red bricks in here with a bit of dry brush. And there's some just here as well. It's really just a case of anything that might add a little bit of interest to the painting. Right, let's stop there and let that dry out. Now we've set about doing the trees. Again, I've just had a short break to allow that to dry, although that wasn't that important about the drying, but I wanted to clean the palette up. Now the trees are very important in the sense that they define the light and dark and the edge of these ruins. I'm not going to put any figures in, although figures would give you a scale. I feel that they take away the sort of sense of calmness in the ruins. Right, so this is a bit of Viridian and raw umber. So we need to now think about how we work these greens. Usually I would start at the top, but an overriding principle I find is useful is to do the drawing bit first, and the drawing bit in this case is getting the rugged textured edge of the ruins. Put a bit of raw sienna with it now to lighten that up. Now there's some trees way in the distance here. In order to push them back, what I'm going to do is blue them a little bit. Take away the greenness. The burnt sienna with the Viridian. Keep it nice and dark. Now some aureolin, just to lighten this little bit up here, but keep it, might be just a tad too light, so a bit of raw sienna to darken it. Again, just think about the edge. We're drawing the rugged edge of the ruins there as much as we're drawing the trees. The other thing we've got to be careful of is we don't shape the trees around these forms, even though they appear to be like that sometimes. Bit of dry brush. A lot of sky showing through these trees and autumn trees. And raw umber, bit of burnt sienna. Just use the brush on its side to indicate these foliage. And then take up a few branches. Again, you must simplify these. You can't hope to paint more. Just transfer to a slightly more pointy brush. This is where I think it's a mistake to overdraw, because you lose the freedom to paint the trees as they grow. And we come down, raw sienna and viridian. That's with a little bit of aureolin yellow to say indicate the runes again with the edge of the line to get that textured ruggedness. And quite dark in the corner. Let's just put a bit of Windsor blue, phthalo blue as some people call it. Prussian blue is very similar. To get this nice and dark in here. And then back to the raw sienna. Now I don't want to surround all of that with foliage. Otherwise it will look as if it's like a halo. So we'll do these other trees now. Viridian with some raw umber. And then this edge is much straighter. Raw sienna. These large bushes are round, and therefore they catch the light like a ball. Then it's a bit darker, so add some burnt sienna here. Viridian and burnt sienna will give you a nice rich dark green. There's just a sense that the land goes up there, and there's a little bit of bright yellowy, a bit of cadmium orange, just some nice to have something slightly different there. Now while we've got the green out, we can start doing a little bit of texturing on the this large field. Crop of weeds or something here. And although you probably can't sense it, there's actually a bank, just a slight rise in the ground here, so I'll overpaint this. It also makes it look a little bit more solid, and we'll try and get rid of some of the sparkle here so that we can reserve, just put a bit dry brush there, and reserve a little bit more of the sparkle for this area which is really catching the sun. So you've got the light and the dark here. There are some additional, because behind shadows, because I was behind me there were some trees which were casting a shadow. The sun was coming over from my right hand shoulder, and just while that's drying, a bit of burnt umber and burnt sienna, we can just put this, indicate this little bit of detail here, and shadow there, and a gutter line, a bit of Payne's grey or ivory black, I think it might be, just there. Right, well, let's just stop and have a clear up and let that dry out. Now we need to add a little bit more texture in terms of individual stones and flints and bricks to the wall. There is some texture from the variation in the colour and the dry brush. Now the thing to watch here is that you don't go too dark, and just be sort of fairly choosy about which particular bricks, stones that you're going to emphasise. Tiny bit of green there, it's probably just a bit of moss and grass growing in crevices on this edge. Okay, don't overdo it. Raw sienna, burnt umber, and cobalt violet. It's almost to give you a sort of almost a non-colour, if I can put it like that. So just be a little bit choosy about where you like very, very dilute light red to indicate some of the red bricks that have been added. Ultramarine, just for the odd little dark. Don't be frightened of having some proper colour, as it were, straight out of the tube. But don't overdo it. And of course the ones that pick out the light varies throughout the day. Tiny bit of red on this wall here. Just fairly delicate strokes, really, and this is a time when you really need to keep stepping back and say, well, have we got enough? It starts to look busy rather than rugged, then you know you've overdone it. Shadows in here change throughout the day. I'm just going to put another one on there to emphasise that archway, and perhaps pick out these bricks a little bit more. Most of the detail I put in this sort of situation, I put it in the light areas, not in the shaded area. Draw people's attention to the shade, to the light areas. It's sort of an evolutionary primordial thing to want to look into the light. Now while that's drying, we can just indicate some of these shadows in the foreground. Viridian, ultramarine, and a bit of light red. Keep it fairly, see what that looks like. Let's just try that. Yep, I think that would be able to just put a bit of raw cyan. I always think a bit of raw cyan is a good mixer. It improves a lot of mixtures. Now I'm going to use some of these shadows to help the composition by directing the viewer to where I want them to look. Soften up there. Again, it was shadows that varied ever such a lot. They extended quite a long way, and then as the sun rose, they receded. To the bottom of the picture. Any little marks which convey texture of grass without actually doing lots of blades of grass, which you wouldn't actually be conscious of as an important element. So you've got the two abstracty marks, again all to do with directing the viewer's attention to a particular area. Now, final few marks just to strengthen up some areas. If I use Winsor blue and Aureolin yellow and burnt sienna, that'll give me a real rich warm green, as long as I don't overdo the Winsor blue. And it's quite nice just to darken one or two areas. Let's darken that to really set the light up on that. When you do these sort of overpainting marks, always be prepared to soften the edge so that they join to what you've already got on the paper. That's important. You need to make friends with the existing marks, otherwise they'll look as if they're sort of cut out and stuck on. And when we've got to this state, I'm just going to darken ultramarine and burnt umber. Just going to darken that really in there to bring out the light on this wall. And then, usual thing, soften it so it sort of joins to what we've already got. Now, if you've conveyed the light and shade on these ruins, and you've got a sense of sunlight and ruggedness and texture, then be satisfied with that fairly modest ambition and stop painting. Well, I hope you've enjoyed that short video. I think it's important to enjoy the painting, enjoy what you're looking at, and enjoy the act of putting colour on paper. That is the most important thing. If you enjoy it, it will actually show through the painting eventually. Thanks for watching.